Next, you'll hear from Dr. Bill Allen, a former member of the United States Commission on Civil Rights and a CURE board member currently.
Good morning. Like Starr and Reverend Little, I must take an initial moment to comment on the events that transpired at Charlottesville. It is exceedingly important for us to understand that we no longer have the liberty to wait for Mandela-like reconciliation in the United States of America, but must take the work into our own hands. It will no longer suffice to seek out enemies to destroy when the task that confronts us is to find fellows to embrace with love. It is fundamentally important that we not be led astray by the cascade of media blaming in the aftermath of tragic events, but that we rather find our way into re-expressing our fundamental confidence in its land and its people. And whatever may be said to the country at large, the most important thing will always remain the ability to say that America is worth fighting for. So let us put aside identity politics. Let us put aside words of wrath and division. Let us remember that Charlottesville was not the environment of a single mad act, but a series of violent confrontations culminating or climaxing in a single mad act. And let us understand that that series of events could be expected so to climax. And therefore, let us try to put an end to violent confrontations, whether on university campuses, state capitals, or municipal parks. Throughout this land, we have a task, and it is up to each and every one of us to complete that task, and we can only complete it if we begin it. CURE has a set of principles which has directed its attention to the work of revitalization in the urban cores of this nation. Those principles will be spoken to this morning, and what they do is ask us to focus our attention squarely on the places where we can intervene to make a difference. It is important. It is of the utmost value that we understand that we must address healthcare needs, not because the people aren't capable of providing for their own health, but that they have been deprived of that capability by the kind of government meddling that has made a complete mess of our healthcare system. And therefore, we have a community responsibility to put it back together. Similarly, government meddling has completely destroyed the promises of education. No one believes any longer in the promise of education with an educational system that consistently underperforms and worse. And why does it do so? Because government meddling has upset the rhythms of American life, which heretofore made education the salvation for so many of us. We are going to address the question of inequitable taxing and ways to redirect it, such that it may become once again the mode of expressing our support for vibrant political institutions rather than a system of oppression, whether for the people at large or targeted enemies of the bureaucrats in charge. And we're going to talk about the real needs of the city and the ways in which the government can be a supportive actor rather than simply interfering with the potential to revitalize growth in those areas where growth is most needed. I will not detail all of those. Others are going to speak about them. So I want to say finally, it is so very important for us to understand the connection between what CURE is doing and the hope for which America seeks. It is so important that we take seriously, and we are so grateful that the present administration in Washington, D.C. is taking it seriously.
The president's response, you feel it has been adequate since Charlottesville on Saturday, and is there anything you would encourage the White House to do next? And then the second question is, do you have faith that the civil rights investigation that DOJ is opening up will be able to come up with any progress on this from there?
Sure, I'll be happy to. To take the last question first, I have complete faith that the FBI will do a thorough job in conducting the investigation. And that is the investigation that the DOJ is leading. So I see no reason for anyone to be skeptical about its discipline and its thoroughness in this regard. With regard to the president's comments, I don't want to be distracted by the debate. So what I do is I listen to the president's comments in the wider context, and you heard Pastor Little speak about this as he rehearsed a series of similar events and remarks made in past history about such events. And what he underscored was the importance of someone speaking from that particular rostrum, speaking to all of us, and not ignoring any of the problems we have to deal with for the mere purpose of satisfying the expectations of some. The president speaks for each and every one of us, and he speaks to each and every one of us. Did the president do that in his remarks? I would say he did. About the frequently repeated ascription of President Trump as the driver of hateful speech in our country. There are two things wrong with that view. The first thing wrong with it is we're pretending to hide behind blaming President Trump for our own failures. Mm-hmm. Exactly. There was a time when we celebrated what we might call the Skokie principle. And when the far right marched through Skokie, Illinois, and the left defended them, their right to march and speak even hateful speech. We are no longer celebrating the Skokie principle in our country. We stopped celebrating the Skokie principle long before Donald Trump announced his candidacy for the presidency. If we have a problem, the problem is that we have lost our way. Now, you have people wandering in the desert, to follow my brother's reversion to the scriptural example, who've lost their way. It's not going to do you much good to blame Moses. Exactly. You've got to ask, why have the people lost their way? Where did they lose their faith? And how can it be restored? In short, I would encourage you and all who have embraced this particular meme to challenge themselves to find better ways to express hopeful expectations of humanity.